The other day, someone left a comment on one of my videos asking if I could do a tutorial on like a Blink-182 song. And for those of you that don't know, I actually started making beats in like a pop punk style like 4 years ago. In fact, if you go to my first video on this channel, it's a Blink-182 tutorial. So I figured it's time to do an updated video. The only problem, I didn't have anyone to do the vocals. So I spent a bit of time looking around asking people if they can do vocals for me. And luckily 𝗕𝗘𝗖𝗢𝗠𝗘 responded and said he could, which is good because he's got vocals like this. So I was pretty confident with what we'd be able to do. So after finding the artist, I had to spend some time listening to Blink-182 and analyzing their stuff. For this project, I wanted to do something similar to What's My Age Again, so I got my notebook out and I started writing down just key details from the mix. Wide heavy guitars, chunky palm mutes, a clean guitar with a little more reverb in it, a saturated bass, punchy compressed drums, a lead vocal and some background vocals, the lead vocal kind of a little buried under the mix a little bit, so that's easy enough. For the clean guitar, I used a Fender Stratocaster, and I sent it through the Jazz Club patch on Amplitude 5, which is pretty much a super light diode distortion going into a Fender Twin, and that sounded like this. It sounded good, but it was a little dry, so I sent it to a plate reverb and a tape delay, and that sounded like this. Next up, I needed chuggy palm mutes. For that, I used 2 of my Amplitude patches called Heavy Hitter and Heavy Hitter's Friend, and that sounded like this. Then I put those 2 in a group, added some room reverb, EQ, compression, and a Pultec. Next, I needed a third roomy guitar to fill out the mix, so I used my In the Middle patch for Amplitude 5, and then threw that in the same group from above. Without the middle guitar, it sounded like this. And now with the middle guitar, it sounded like this. Now, no pop punk song is complete without some octaves, so I grabbed my Just Butter patch and recorded some high octaves, and then recorded the double, but this time I swapped out the Fender Deluxe for a high amp. That left all the guitars sounding like this. For the drums, I used Superior Drummer, specifically the Gospel EZX, which might be a sin, and just added a tiny bit of plate reverb on the snare. That sounded like this. But I needed more compression, so I threw on an 1176 with a moderately high attack, then I put it through a Pultec for an airy boost, and that sounded like this. Lastly, for bass, I used the Contact Scar-B pre-bass, and I threw that through my Best Bass patch, bass lane, and decapitator. Without the effects, it sounds like this. And with the effects, it sounds like this. That was it for the entire instrumental. Now it was time to send it over to 𝗕𝗘𝗠𝗓. Perfect, we got the vocals. Let's mix. Okay, so I just want to go through these vocals a little more in depth because I find vocals are harder to mix for people than like other stuff. So I'm just going to go through these sends first because the sends are kind of a huge part of the mix and there's a lot of them. So I've got a Context Essentials as my room reverb. Then I got a plate reverb. It is the Rev 6000. This is the LX480 plate. Then we got a nonlinear, which is a Verb Suite patch, I believe. Yeah. Looks like this. It's got like that 80s kind of feel. I don't even know if I'm sending to it. I am. Then we got a Hall reverb, which is the LX480 Hall. Next up, we have a Lush reverb from Arturia. It's the Rev Intensity. Sounds really good. This is like one of my favorite reverbs. Then we got a Slap delay from Echo Boy, a tape delay from Valhalla, a digital delay from Arturia. Then I've got a throw reverb setup. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm using it. Maybe just a slight bit. And then I have like an ADT setup, which is just a microshift, but I don't think I'm using it. So we sent over some gang vocals and some chant vocals and then a lead vocal. So I'm just going to turn off the gang and the hey and I call it the hey sub, but it's really just the chant vocals. And I'm just going to focus on the main vocals for now, and then we'll go into the rest. So I'll turn off all these sends, and this is what it sounds like, completely dry.
I felt alone. It was a summer day, set in stone. I'm a runaway.
First thing we did was we added a Vox box for some kind of like saturation, some warmth.
I felt alone. It was a summer day.
That just looks like this. There's a bit of a low peak and a mid dip, just a tiny bit though. Nothing compression wise or de-essing wise. Then just to polish up the performance a little bit, we put auto tune on.
I felt alone. It was a summer day.
Just a slight bit, not really too noticeable. Next up, we had some resonances we had to take care of.
I felt alone.
Specifically this one. Very sharp. I prefer to do dynamic EQ. Dynamic EQ and multiband compression as opposed to static EQ. I mean, it depends, but for something like this resonance isn't here all the time. It's really only showing up when he does the O, like felt alone, oh, that kind of area. So I'll do dynamic if I don't need to cut all the time, but need to kind of apply a threshold to cut when the resonance shows up. Other than that, we've got this little 400 or 500 hertz, kind of nasally, not even nasally, I guess, a little boxy. And then lastly, this little pink area, 760.
Set in stone.
And that cleaned it up nicely. Next, you need some compression with a distressor. Distressor, I find, really thickens up the vocal. I have it set to 3-to-1, the input, the attack. The attack and release are really quick. I kind of just wanted to instantly clamp down on those transients. And for the most part, it kind of stays around 2 to 6 dB gain reduction.
I felt alone. It was a summer day, set in stone that I'm a runaway.
And then in the higher parts,
I'm falling like the rain every time she loves that I hate that I'm not enough.
So it clamps down a little harder when the vocal's louder. Obviously, that's kind of how compression works. After that, I wanted to do some just averaging, some evening EQ. So this is set to around 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction at all times, more or less.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
I lied. It's actually 3 to 5.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
I did this mix yesterday.
Baby, tell me, are we done yet? She thinks I'm a liar. I just tell the story cool how I'm.
And if you'll notice, it's actually set to limit as well. After that, I do a bit of multiband compression. I love doing multiband compression on vocals. It makes it sound, for something like this, somewhat intimate, but still controlled sort of thing. So these are the settings I have here. You can see the way they react.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
This area,
baby, tell me, are we done yet?
being a lot more controlled.
She thinks I'm a liar. I just tell the story cool how I'm uninspired.
With Eon's voice, kind of the 2 to 7K range is a bit, it's quite dynamic and a little sharp. So I just control it as much as possible.
Baby, tell me.
And then as for like the little boominess over here, controlled but not super controlled. I still want that intimate kind of up close feeling. Next, because the vocal's so sharp, we put some DS on there. It's actually quite a wide range of frequency detection here, but it was kind of a little too when it was in the high end and a little too when it was in the lower end. So we just did a bigger range to try and account for all of that.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
And it's hitting pretty hard.
Baby, tell me, are we done yet?
And then my favorite part of the vocal mix is the saturation here. It's just warm tape, just the basic straight up. You load it, and that's the initial kind of preset initial patch. And then I cut it into 2 different frequencies, at the crossover being at 1117. A little more drive on the high end, a little less drive on the low end. I needed to smooth out that high end a little more.
I lose hope when the sun sets. Baby, tell me, are we done yet?
And then to add some thickness to the vocal, I had to add another room reverb, just like a tiny bit. It's also automated on in sections. So if you look here, no, it's not. It's set to 9.71 wet. So like really barely noticeable. But it still adds that thickness to the vocal.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
Because when I take it off,
I lose hope when the sun sets.
and put it on,
I lose hope when the sun sets.
you can hear that little bit of thickness, that little bit of width. Then we need to do some broad EQ shaping, a lot of EQ in this. Actually, a lot of processing to begin with. It was a bit of a hard vocal to control. Very basic, just a bass cut and a mid cut.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
And then I found the vocal dynamically was falling a little volume. If you look at the actual waveform, you can see how dynamic it is. You get these points like this and really quiet points like this. So the best thing you could do for that, or at least in this sense, is some upwards compression. So I just have Adapter Sculpt. This is what the upwards compression looks like.
I lose hope when the sun sets.
Just a tiny bit.
Baby, tell me, are we done yet?
And lastly, some RVox for some control. I only automated it on in the chorus sections, places where I needed it to really be stuck right there dynamically. So it's off here.
Hate that I'm not enough. She knows that. We're the kids that never grew up, living fast and never lose us.
And that's it for the main vocal. Obviously, like you can see all the sends here. You can see which one corresponds to which. I'm not going to go through that. You already know my sends, so you can just see the numbers here. Gang vocals were pretty easy. I just put them in a sub. I didn't do any individual processing. I just did the processing on the group. So we have some 𝗕𝗘𝗖𝗢𝗠𝗘 here in limiting mode.
We're the kids that never grew up.
Just a tiny bit. I wanted a little more dynamic in there. Otherwise, it felt very, very stiff, almost like almost chorusy, sort of, if that makes sense. So I kind of kept it a little more dynamic. Next, you're going to the CQ. This actually isn't really doing any EQ. It's not. It's just doing a drive. It's got really nice drive. You can hear it here. Hopefully you can hear it. If not, I'll turn it up.
We're the kids that never grew up.
Does that make sense? I'll turn it off and you can see the difference here.
We're the kids that never grew up. Living fast and never lose us.
Just a bit of saturation, really. Then I cleaned up some lows and some kind of mids with some EQ. Then a bit more control with some Pro C2.
We're the kids that never grew up.
Then because it's group vocals, they all have the same S's, and we don't need that because we already have the main lead vocal with that sibilance. So I just slammed a de-esser on the chant and the gang vocals.
We're the kids that never grew up. Living fast and never lose us. I lose hope when the sun sets.
Almost sounds like it has a lisp because I'm really not trying to let any of that high sibilance through. Lastly, a plate reverb just to smooth it all out. I need them to be in the background. So the reason I add a reverb to the track is as opposed to, well, I mean, I'm sending two reverbs as well, but I'm adding this reverb to the group because it gets rid of the dry signal instead of having the dry signal and the wet signal separately. Putting the reverb on the track will get rid of the dry signal to add wet signal, which I find adds more depth to the mix. It'll bring that layer back in the mix because you're getting rid of high end.
We're the kids that never grew up. Living fast.
I'd actually add a little more.
I lose hope when the sun sets. Baby, tell me, are we done yet?
And then there is a utility on here doing absolutely nothing, so we can actually get rid of that. So now combining the lead vocal with the gang vocal without the sends, it sounds like this.
She knows that we're the kids that never grew up. Living fast and never lose us. I lose hope when the sun sets. Baby, tell me, are we done yet?
Cool. And then the last thing we have is a hey sub, which is just like, hey, over here.
Hey.
Super simple, 𝗕𝗘𝗖𝗢𝗠𝗘, set to compressed mode this time with some drive from the SIEQ or CQ, and then just some EQ to clean it up, basically just rolling off a bunch of lows. And that sounds like this.
Hey.
Okay, so we'll play all the vocals together, and then I'm going to add the sends, and then I'll play it in the mix.
We're the kids that never grew up. Living fast and never lose us. I lose hope when the sun sets. Baby, tell me, are we done yet?
You can see adding the sends adds a ton more ambience, a ton more space. It almost sounds like too much, but you add the rest of the instrumental in, and it works quite nicely. So.
I felt alone, it was a summer day, set in stone, that I'ma run away. I never knew that we could fall apart, a bitter bruise on my broken heart. A little bit of pain every time we touch, I'm falling like the rain every time we. She loves that I hate that I'm not enough. She knows that we're the kids that never grew up, living fast and never lose us. I lose hope when the sun sets.
think it's pretty reminiscent of Blink-182. So hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.